Hello peeps and peepettes, I am Specsun aka Brightwave here with you once again, and this video is a video response to Spinnernet 1 and the question that he posed to us all. What are our 3 most favorite years in pro wrestling history? And as a long-time professional wrestling fan, as many of you are, I am as well, this is not the easiest question for me to answer, but I will do my best. And, you know, just looking at the business for over the last 20 plus years, and even the years in which I wasn't alive to actually see it, I've grown fond of a lot of the old school wrestling. So this may be an educational video for some of you who are not really that familiar with some of the wrestling that I will discuss, but, you know, this is a unique question, and I'm going to do my best to present a unique answer. So without further ado, let me get down to it. The first year I'm going to talk about is 1986. In 1986, I was only 1 year old at the time, but I remember this was around the time I first started to watch wrestling. I can't remember that much, but as the years have gone by, I have gained a more understanding about that year. I've seen a ton of footage of 1986 from all of the territories, from majority of the territories, I should say, as well as the mainstream companies, as many of you do know. But I'll start off with Jim Crockett Promotions, which I believe is the best. Was my favorite era in pro wrestling history, around the mid to late 90s, looking at JCP. And you had Ric Flair, who was the world champion. The Horsemen were really at their apex. They were just cooking. The likes of Nature Boy Ric Flair, as I mentioned, the world heavyweight champion. You had Ole Anderson and Art Anderson, who were at the time the national tag team champions. Top contenders for the world tag team titles. And then you also had the man himself, Tully Blanchard, who was had his share of being the world television champion towards the end of the year when he defeated Dusty Rhodes at which I consider the biggest event of 1986. Not necessarily WrestleMania, but I was a really big mark over the last, I say, 10 or plus years of Starrcade 86, which I think is a phenomenal show. And if any of you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend that you do so. Jim Crockett Promotions had everything that I like in wrestling. It had the entertainment value. It was simple. It wasn't confusing. The storylines were just fantastic. The Rock and Roll Express anchoring the tag team division for a large portion of the year. The same way with the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette, Dennis Condrey, and beautiful Bobby Eaton. Just, I have to include Big Bubba too. Big Boss Man, if you don't know his previous moniker before going to the WWE. Just a lot of great stuff came out of 1986, and it's by far, in my opinion, the best year of Jim Crockett Promotions. And also, I have to talk about the WWE as well. You know, I did mention WrestleMania earlier in the video. It wasn't the best WrestleMania, I think, looking back at it, but it was very innovative. You had 3 cities, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, hosting the event. They're going back and forth. This was really innovative stuff for a wrestling company in the mid-1980s. And then you had King Kong Bundy and Hulk Hogan, which had a great feud. TNT was really continuing to really show good programming. The USA Network was really coming into the play strong in the WWE. A lot of great entertaining stuff. We saw the beginning of feuds and we saw the end of feuds. We saw Ricky Steamboat starting to get a bigger push in the WWE, which will eventually culminate in 1987 at WrestleMania 3 in the Pontiac Silverdome against the Macho Man Randy Savage. You had a lot of really good stuff going on in 1986, and there was a lot of, you know, not necessarily great things, but still good entertainment in WCCW, World Class Championship Wrestling. And I have to admit, the AWA, I think out of all the years in the mid-90s, I think 1986 with Stan Hansen as its world's champion, and as well as Rick the Model Martel, I think they had a pretty decent year as well. So I can't overlook the American Wrestling Association. My next year would be 1991. Now, 1991 has a lot of sentimental value for me, simply because I was a huge WCW fan, an extension of Jim Crockett Promotions, I will say. But all the drama going on with Ric Flair leaving WCW and then eventually going into the WWE marked a huge precedent in pro wrestling. It showed that anybody could go over to the opposite company if the price was right and if the situation was right. And Ric Flair had just had enough of Jim Herd, and you saw what had happened. But many people talk about that incident, but it was so much more in WCW. The Steiner brothers were a phenomenal tag team, continuing on their dominance from 1990. They became the second team to hold the United States and World Tag Team Championship in WCW when they defeated the Fabulous Freebirds in early of 1991. And unfortunately, Scott had an injury which really Harper that team's success, and then you had Bill Kazmaier come in and be Rick's tag team partner towards the end. For that year, I always will remember, in terms of WCW, the tremendous tag team match, in which I consider one of the best events in 1991, Super Bowl 91, between Lex Luger and Sting. Lex Luger, keep in mind, the current U.S. champion at the time, against the Steiner brothers, which I consider one of the best matches. It was rated quite simply the best match, I believe, in 1991. I have to go back and look at it, but I believe that was so. Johnny B. Bad, Mark Merrill makes his debut at the event. The Diamond Stud makes his debut. There were so many great things that happened that year. NWA officially, it becomes WCW in January of 1991. You had a good angle between Ric Flair and Tatsumi Fujinami, who was the IWGP heavyweight champion at the time. Just a tremendous year for WCW, and you can't leave out the WWE. SummerSlam was tremendous. I absolutely love SummerSlam 91. I consider it one of the top WWE pay-per-views of all time. You had Savage and Liz get married. The match made in heaven, the match made in hell. You had the match made in hell, of course, with the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan teaming up against the team of General Adnan, Colonel Mustafa, and of course Sergeant Slaughter. I thought that was a really good match. I really liked the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom winning the World Tag Team Championships, the WWE Tag Team Championships against the Nasty Boys in their little street fight. Mr. Perfect and Bret Hart put on one of the best matches I have ever seen, still in my top 3, in which Bret Hart won his first major singles championship in the WWE by becoming the Intercontinental Champion, and he had the coach there. Just a lot of really good stuff around SummerSlam 91, and there's so much more about that year. Undertaker winning the WWE Championship. It was a really good year, and it was also marked the first year that we really only had two companies that were really the big dog in wrestling. The AWA had folded in late 1990, so you didn't have as much there as you did in previous years as a wrestling fan, but the business was still cooking to an extent. And of course, Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 7 winning the WWE Championship, Randy Savage and Liz, I mentioned them about SummerSlam 91, but it had culminated really at SummerSlam 91, but it began at WrestleMania 7 and that tremendous reunion between the two after the brilliant Savage versus the Ultimate Warrior match, which I still think is one of the most underrated matches in WWE history. And now moving on, there's so much more to talk about in 86 and 91, but I'll go fast forward to 1996. Now, I think this is probably the most pivotal year in pro wrestling history when you had the NWO formed. And that year was when I had a resurgence in terms of my love for pro wrestling. I was a huge WCW fan at that time, and I was even a bigger ECW/WWE fan. I mean, I loved every aspect really that was going on in the business. Even the indie scene was actually doing a pretty good job. And when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan formed to make the NWO, I just went berserk. And that was really one of the biggest moments I ever saw. The Bash at the Beach pay-per-view, I still have the VHS with me. I'll watch that over and over again. Hulk Hogan finally turning heel. It was long overdue. Many people don't remember about that time, as Hogan was actually getting booed on some house shows several months prior to that. And I think that's probably what really led Kevin Sutherland to say, all right, we got to start making a move, and let's see if we can incorporate Hulk Hogan as a heel. And it worked out tremendously. And then you have Stone Cold Steve Austin making his mark in the WWE, becoming the king of the ring by defeating Jake the Snake Roberts. And we all know about his famous speech after that with Doc Hendricks, a.k.a. Michael Hayes, in which he said, Austin 3:16. And that just took off. You had The Rock debut as well in 1996 at the Survivor Series. It really was, 1996 truly was a precursor to what we would see going forward. I didn't even mention Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 12 and that tremendous Iron Man match. And all of the big events, all of the big matches really came to play in 1996. And that's why I think that 1986, 1991, and 1996 are my 3 favorite years in pro wrestling. I hope you guys enjoyed this and keep looking at my channel and also keep up with SpinnerNet. He's actually doing a lot of good stuff as usual. Peace out, peeps. See you later.